He's off the bench. Merchan's already off the bench. We were told as soon as he said, at this time, I impose that sentence to cover all 34 counts. I wish you Godspeed for your second term in office. Thank you. And Donald Trump, president-elect, hangs up the video call. So all told, this, 30-something minutes.
Yeah, not shocking. This doesn't need to be a whole played out in front of the TV cameras. Judge Merchan is doing his job. I mean, this is almost like the ghost of Jack Smith, not yet, biting Donald Trump on the behind. And you know what? At the end of the day, incarceration or not, you are a felon. No matter what he says, no matter how many times he jumps up and down, he has a right to appeal, and ultimately that will be decided. Donald Trump is a felon with a capital F, period.
And no punishment. But we did hear the prosecution go pretty hard at Donald Trump, even knowing that no punishment was coming. They, in fact, recommended unconditional release when the prosecution took its turn before Judge Merchan gave his sentence. And I wonder, Kristen, your thoughts on how the prosecution approached this moment today, the end of their case, and obviously it may not be the very end of the line. So how much of that was lingering in their mind in terms of what they said today?
I think it's important to think about the criminal justice system not only in the form of punishment, but more importantly in the form of accountability. And quite frankly, the fact that D.A. Bragg set out and has openly stated repeatedly, this is about accountability. This is about accountability. And then in his petition papers in response to Donald Trump trying to push away or dismiss the case, right, to try to stretch that presidential immunity, D.A. Bragg's made very clear that his intention was accountability. And that's why he said, listen, if they're going to argue that this needs to be dismissed in the interest of public interest because of the fact that it's going to hinder his ability to really follow through and be a president, then give him unconditional discharge. Still allow him to be accountable, to be saddled with that felony conviction, those felony convictions, I should say, 34 of them, but let him know that this type of misconduct cannot go forward.
So, Adam, talk to us about unconditional discharge, what it means and what does that carry?
So normally a felony sentence, even without prison time, you'd be checking in with the probation department, you'd be subject to drug and alcohol testing, you'd be subject to fines. Each felony conviction would have up to a maximum of $5,000 fine times 34. Here, an unconditional discharge is really done. You live with the stigma of the felony, and you do have certain collateral consequences. Trump had a gun permit. I believe that the NYPD has now rescinded his gun permit. There are certain collateral consequences, but basically he is done. Yet he lives as a felon. He goes into office as a convicted felon.
Adam, can I just get your thoughts on, again, the unprecedented moment that we are living in now? This is going to be the only president in the history of this country to have been sentenced on criminal felony charges.
It is unprecedented. It is historic. It is different. But I come back to, it's the same as every single day in America. Criminals are convicted for their crimes and go and move forward with their lives carrying that stigma of a felony conviction.
So, Jeremy, now clearly, and Blanche said that in the beginning of his comments, that this was all going to be grounds for some kind of legal maneuvering going forward to appeal. I'm just wondering, when he talks about the collateral consequences, what are the collateral consequences for a felon, regardless of the fact that he's going to be entering the White House in 10 days? Just what are some of those, collateral consequences?
Well, as Adam just pointed out, there are certain things for the firearm, for example. I mean, he can still vote. He couldn't run for office on the state level in New York, though I don't expect him to pursue the governorship or anything like that. But any other person would not be able to do so. The big issue is, as I said before, this doesn't go away. There's no expungement in New York. There is sealing, and a felony does seal as a matter of law in 8 years. So it will seal to the public within reason, but this is a public process, especially the most public process we've ever seen, so it's not going away and he's not running away from it. I can't stress enough, I think the big take-home here is not about the lack of punishment, to what you said moments ago. It's about the word of law and accountability. Because no matter what you do or say, you have that right to appeal, and that takes time. But in barring that appeal being successful forever, you will be not just an asterisk, but in big, bold letters, a felon. And who here would ever say it's only an e-felony? right? I'm not going to jail, big deal. Nobody would say that. None of us would have this job in any capacity if we were convicted felons.
But he could have received up to 4 years behind bars.
One in the third to four.
He could have received up to $5,000 in a fine per each count. He didn't get any of that. So if you're looking at this as a layman and you're saying, if this person weren't Donald J. Trump, who is going to be president, would that unconditional discharge have been the outcome here? And are the people who might be thinking like, oh, I guess presidents really do play by a different set of rules. What's your answer to them?
Within reason, that's a reasonable response. Because, yes, he's being treated differently. Though one might argue that he would never have been prosecuted in the first place if he wasn't the president or, someone who served as president in that capacity. But we've seen in New York and states across the board have seen legislators on county, state, and federal level get prosecuted for crimes. And we hold our elected officials to a higher standard, not a higher legal standard, but a higher moral standard. So this is fair. It is what it is. He's convicted. That's justice. That's justice.
Kristen, what are your thoughts?
I agree. I think there's two things here, right? There's that accountability, but then there's also the fact that the judges upheld the ability for this case not to be dismissed.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that is really important because not only is it justice, it is justice. It is the criminal justice system playing itself out, not allowing Donald Trump to utilize his position of importance to just allow things to just go away. It is allowing him to be held accountable. It is showing that the rule of law will prevail if allowed to. And I think that is such an important message to tell to the public. Yes, you're absolutely right. It is difficult if I was a convicted felon and I was convicted of the same exact crimes that Donald Trump was, and I got a heightened sentence just because I'm not Donald Trump. Yes, that is hard to digest. But at the end of the day, I think one thing that is very important is that every criminal defendant has the right to have various factors be weighed in their sentencing and it to be applied appropriately.
Let's go back to the courthouse. Our Vaughn Hilliard is there. I'm curious, Vaughn, what's happening there now that this is over? And talk to us more about Judge Merchan's closing message in this case.
Right, the courtroom is beginning to clear out, and the court is officially adjourned after 7 weeks of trial and then ultimately today's sentencing here. And the Judge Merchan ended by giving him the unconditional discharge sentence and saying, quote, "At this time I impose that sentence to cover all 34 counts." But his parting line to the incoming president was, quote, "I wish you Godspeed for your second term in office. Thank you." And I think to the point that you guys were making here, this is quite a moment coming 10 days before inauguration. The Supreme Court had the opportunity to step in last night.